Morning, everyone. My name is Adewolu. I work with Google as Government Affairs and Public Policy Manager. It's great to be here, and basically what I'm going to look to do is to share a few thoughts around our approaches to what we believe should create some kind of framework or some kind of guidance around how we can all be safer online, either as kids, either as parents to kids, either as teachers, educators, and whatnot. I think before going into this slide, I just thought to share like a little analogy, when we talk about online safety. When we were younger, there were zoos, right? And our parents took us to the zoo to go see the animals. A lot of those animals you read about in books, you see a picture, P for pig, G for gorilla, whatever. But it was a slightly different experience when you actually went to the zoo and then you saw a gorilla, you saw a snake, you saw crocodile, right? So there was a benefit in being in close quarters, close range, observing these things that was a whole nother level from what you read in the books. Now, in going to the zoos, of course, I grew up in the University of Ibadan, and we had a great zoo there at the time. I'm not sure what state it is in these days, but it was an awesome zoo, great building, great structures. They had most of the animals you wanted to see. And it was interesting that for all of those animals, bar none, there were enclosures, right? So the gorillas, their place, greenery. I think they had something like some water before, and then there's an electrocuted fence. I think it was electrocuted, I'm not sure, but it was, barbed wire type fence. The snakes, enclosure, glass. The lions, really high barbed wire type fence, keep people out. All the animals, bar none, there were enclosures. More interestingly is, when we went to the zoo with our parents, despite those enclosures, I don't remember getting to the zoo and my mother saying, okay, Adewolu, we're at the zoo now. I'm going to sit here and read newspapers. You run along and do whatever you like. No, As you went from point to point, she held your hand at places where your hand needed to be held. At places where you were trying to climb and reach over things, they'll pull you back and tell you, no, sir, that's not how we behave around here, I tell that story to underline this whole conversation around safety on the internet. There are benefits in being online, right? And there are risks. The solution will never be to say that because there are risks, we shut down the internet, we shut down access so kids don't go online. The same way with the animals. I used to have a thing for National Geographic, and it was amazing how much we've learned about animals from just going to watch them. It's a different thing to read a book, right? And this is how hippopotamus behave. But when you go and you see it in its natural habitat, it's a different level of learning for us, particularly as humans. So there was that thing about internet is there are benefits, there are risks. Solution is never to shut down. So let's take that one aside. Denial of access is not a solution. Going back to the same zoo example, you look at what I described. Those who built the zoo, they created guardrails, right? We had glass enclosures, barbed wire, electrocution. You even had, I can't remember what they're called. I think they were called wardings or something. Some of those old babas that would be there to tell you, bring that child down or don't let him go that way, We had all of that there from those who provided that infrastructure. And then you, as a parent who went to the zoo, you also had that obligation to be sure, despite all of these things, you're a child, and children will do what? They will children. So I will try to keep you from, even though I have the confidence that some of these things are there, I understand that I have a role to play in helping them to function optimally. It's not enough to say, well, the guardrails are there, so I can go and sleep on a bicycle. No, things are likely to go wrong, right? So I just wanted to use that analogy to drive home that point and underline three things. There are benefits and there are risks. Denial of access is never a solution. there are protections that have been provided by the infrastructure service owners and service providers. But on top of those protections, as users, whether it be parents, educators, whatever we are, there's an added level of responsibility that we need to exercise to optimally allow those protections to function. So context, why is this important? Why are we talking about, safety online and the internet and all of that? There was a study that Google commissioned and we worked on with some partners, and it was basically about 16 emerging economies or countries around the world who had shown significant progress in terms of internet adoption, in terms of usage. NCC publishes those numbers all the time. You see how numbers are growing in terms of how people are using data. And the whole argument about those 16 countries who were called digital sprinters is that we recognize that given how usage of the internet is being adopted in these countries, there's a significant potential for socioeconomic growth if that usage is backed up with the right policies such that there's further investment, such that those who are already invested are able to optimize those investments. So that's the whole idea behind digital sprinters. And here's the interesting thing. Out of those 16 countries, Nigeria is one of the 16. There's Brazil, there's a couple of, about 16 of them, but Nigeria is one of the 16 in terms of highlighting the fact that there's significant growth in terms of adoption of data in Nigeria. Of course, again, like I said, NCC is here. Telcos have done a lot in terms of bridging that digital exclusion conversation. Before now, if you needed to use the internet, if you needed to do anything, you need to go to something called a cyber cafe, right? And there was limitation. They didn't have 1,000 systems. They had a limited number of systems. You would have to wait. And when you did get on a system, your access was not unlimited, right? It was based on what time you paid for, and that time was a function of money, right? Along the line, yes, they introduced overnight browsing and all of those kind of things, but there was never a scenario where you would sleep in the cyber cafe. You'd have to go home at some point, right? But with mobiles, the internet is in your hand. Toko was talking about the conversation with the kids, and then somebody says X, somebody says Y. We're not going to beat ourselves. We're just going to go on the internet and check whether it's X or Y. There's no need for... So there's that thing about access to the internet. The gaps, the hindrances that we had before now are increasingly being taken off. It's a whole lot more open and accessible than it used to be. Again, of course, there's about significant investments by providers. Again, allow me to market. Google had that Equiano landing last year, which was basically about bringing subsea cable and internet capacity onshore to resell, to people who will bring that inland. Recently, you had at least 2 or 3 players that I'm aware of in the Nigerian telecom space launching 5G services, and it's not restricted to Nigeria. There's growing interest and rollout of 5G, faster technologies, smarter devices all over the world. There's increased investment in technology, in taking this thing and bringing it as close to the end user as possible. Last 3 bullet points are about stats. Okay, you've seen from UNICEF that says that 1 in 3 internet users is below the age of 18. The ITU, which is the International Telecoms Union, says that 69% of young people are online. UNICEF tells us that over 1.5 billion children impacted by school closures at the peak of COVID. Before COVID happened, you never thought, if you can't go to school, as in go to school, then there's no school, right? You had to go to school before COVID, right? But then COVID opened us up the possibility that some of this learning could actually be delivered online. Yes, there were hiccups, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't widespread. There are people who had infrastructure challenges that couldn't adopt that option. But just think of it that before then, did we imagine that it was possible to learn and educate without actually going into a learning and education structure? Maybe not so much. But that's one of the things that COVID has opened up to show that, look, you can learn anywhere, right? And all of that means that kids are going into the internet more, parents, users, everybody's, not just kids really, everybody's going to the internet more. And even if the first port of call is education and learning, given that the internet is the internet, and given that human beings are human beings, we're curious, right? So if I spend 40 minutes learning and doing mathematics, I'll also want to look at what's going on in YouTube or some other exciting stuff out there. I'm not going to do mathematics all day. Nobody does that. Well, I imagine, right? So that's the other thing about how COVID and everything we've seen in the wake of the lockdown has opened up all sorts of possibilities, and we're aware of things that probably never averted our minds to before then. The big picture, I realize now, you know how some things look different when you work on them and then in real life, the color optics might not be, but just basically talk through, and the same thing we said before about opportunities and risks. On the one hand, you know, there's the chance to learn without borders, right? The fact that I was born in a little village somewhere in an obscure place in Ondo State doesn't mean I'm going to die there. I can make friends anywhere in the world. I can interact, share my ideas, and also hear from people anywhere in the world. So it's that whole thing about borders are being removed. And just as borders are being removed and we're able to interact, it also means that whatever it is that I do well, there's a huger platform for it, right? I see this, I don't know if any of us are familiar with them. I don't know what they're called, by the way. These kids from Uganda that dance. I don't know if they really live in the village. I mean, they don't look like they live in that village. But they dance in the village, right? Now imagine that before there was an internet, the only people who saw them dance were the villagers, right? But now you see them online. I mean, hey, Lagos, Nigeria, I can watch these kids. In addition to that, if they really did grow up and live in the village, what that thing has done for them, it has given them a stage. I mean, I've seen them in all sorts of places. They dance everywhere, right? So whatever it is that they were doing, it's no longer limited to just that village and that stage. They have a global audience. The second part is the head start on exposure to ICT. And I don't think it's even an ICT thing. I think it's general. You see about this phrase we've been hearing since forever, catch them young. Anything you start early enough, there's a high likelihood that you will master it, right? I was coming here this morning. By function of habit, I tend to put on the map, right? Not because I don't know where I'm going, but there might just be some extra information. Maybe yesterday, something fell somewhere, and then they're like, no, don't take that place, take this place. But I felt a bit more confident, even though sometimes I'm anxious driving on the mainland. I know that place, I know where I'm going, I know where to turn and where not to turn. Right? So that familiarity, because I've done this several times before, I mean, I could probably have closed my eyes at some point because I knew where I was going. And it's the same thing that the internet does in terms of if we start early, if kids are exposed early, people are getting excited about ChatGPT and all of that stuff. I'm not saying don't get excited, but we're scratching the surface because ideas are like this. I digress a bit now. I think that one of the reasons why God hasn't drawn a line on creation is that the possibilities are endless. There's somebody who is going to be here in 5 or 6 years that will have some huge idea that will transform totally the way things are done. A lot of the things that we're doing today was ideas. Google was a few people sitting in a garage and said, how do I take all of this information that is out there and make it available, not just in California, but to anybody, anywhere in the world? It was an idea. Anything that we've done today, cars, telephones, it was somebody's idea, right? So there's that sense that if we think we're great now, we can probably even get greater. And that will happen because more people started this journey early. They acquired the skills. I mean, Tope talked about her kids coding. When I was younger, coding was something you did in university. You know, that's top level, right? About 8 or 9 year olds coding, right? Starting early. Flip side of that is, like I mentioned, there's the good and the bad. There are risks, right? Pretty much the same way that your parents would drop you in school then and go away, and then there'll be some guy or some girl who would say nasty things to you in school or who would treat you nasty. It's even worse online because at least when we went to school, you could see each other. The bully could size you up and, yeah, this one I can handle this one. But online, you know, somebody said that thing that sometimes you're on Twitter, you're having arguments, that he always says, before you argue with somebody, go and check the picture. And then you realize that, hey, this conversation we're having, you can't relate because you were not there. So You know, that kind of thing. So there's that anonymity, right? We're all peers online. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what school you went to. You're on the internet, I'm on the internet. I talk to you, you talk to me. If you like it, you stay. You don't like it, you walk away. But then the risk, like I said, is the chance that, just as we had in playgrounds in school, now it's online, the scale of abuse is wider. People are bolder. You know, it's that thing that we say that, you know, I draw a line, the burn you will cross the line, and then I knew that my house was nearby, so I could run off. Now imagine on the internet, there's no line to draw. You're never going to catch me. I can say anything I want to you, and I know that you can't touch me, right? So there's that thing about cyberbullying, sexual abuse, exploitation. I mean, like I said, kids are kids. They're curious, and that's not a bad thing. I always say one of the high risk factors in parenting is that how we sometimes kill that curiosity. You know, like, don't stop. You know, but that's the way they are. They're that way for a reason. They want to, and they're open-minded, right? But then there are people who exploit that open-mindedness for all sorts of things, like I said, the sexual abuse, child trafficking, and all of that. Cybersecurity is also an equally important element. We talk about, and God, I hate that expression. You hear people say data is the new gold, right? It's information. That's what knowing who is here in this room today, knowing where they're coming from, maybe knowing who they bank with or where they work. As you begin to open up that data stream and I begin to understand more of things about you, the possibilities are endless. I can create products. Unlike when you were younger, and then every ad on TV you had to watch, whether it related to you or not. Because, I mean, it was TV. You can't change it. Until you finish the ad and go back to what you're watching, you had to watch it. But now advertising can be a bit more specific. People talk about why is it that I was talking about something yesterday, I was searching for something the other day, and then now I'm getting suggestions and that kind of a thing. It's that whole thing about information. If you provide information, a lot can be created around that information that you provide, sometimes for good and sometimes for bad. The risk factor in this element is knowing that children are who they are. How do we get them from a place where they don't give out information that they ordinarily should not be giving out? Based on that, at Google we had, and we still have, I think, 3 primary approaches to how we design and develop products. And that's what we basically try to outline in this slide. Talking about how safety by default is a critical part of that. So in developing any of these products and things that we use, looking out for things like what are potential backdoors, what are elements where people can creep in, and probably as you're doing what you're doing, they're also doing what they're doing, and getting information, understanding your usage and all of that. So making sure that the products are safe in the initial construction is a key element of what we do. The other side is privacy, of course. I mean, like I said, we'll talk about how, you know, I saw something yesterday and now it's been suggested to me and all of that. Data privacy is something that is absolutely key. If you don't, platforms that you use, there's a high likelihood that you will refrain to some degree from using those platforms. How do we build that trust? Is by instilling the sense that if we are careful with what we obtain from you, we are careful with how that data is used and how that data is processed. The last piece of that is about equipping. Go back to the example from the zoo that I talked about. Yes, the zoo has created all of those things, but then when you get to the zoo, there's some extra 1 or 2 things that you do to make sure that you have a safe experience at the zoo. And in knowing that, we do our utmost to equip our users with the knowledge and the resources that they require to make them active collaborators in ensuring safety when they are online. We're not being prescriptive. Well, we're prescriptive to some degree to tell you this is nice, this is decent, and this is that. But then we know that tastes, aspirations, and all of that, they're diverse, right? There are, I don't know, 20 or 30 people in this room. You brought up one debate topic, you probably get 20 or 30 people. So that's human, right? They're all think different. So we don't come and say, you know, everybody think this way. Rather, the approach is there is a platform, these are the tools and the resources that you require. This is the knowledge that you require to create for yourself a safe experience.
before delving into the last bit of my slide, where in thinking through what might perhaps resonate to the audience, both in the room and online, I thought this one
is right. Yes, we're technology, we build products, we provide services. So on the one hand, I thought to share something that is actually a product that helps with online safety. But then on the other side is also, and on top of that is, and I think it was a gentleman here who asked that question about, you know, people get older, you want to be careful, you don't want to intrude, how do you still balance and all of that? We realize that it's not enough to just create a product and create tools. It's just as important to create a culture. Sometimes when I have conversations with friends who probably, you know, we grew up in the same community and, you know, now the people are all over the world. It's always interesting how we say, you know, regardless of what you've acquired or learned as you traveled around the world and met different people, there's some things that were drummed into your head at home, in Sunday school, or in Boy Scouts, or in some of those communes when you were younger and you were in a place where you were more open and amenable to learning, that they're a lifelong set of principles, regardless of where you go. There's something that you would just not do. I remember I used to work at some place and my boss used to say to me at the time that, you know, Adewolu, the only thing we can do here is to speak English and do the utmost that we can so that we deliver on the result that we promised at the beginning of the year so that we get a bonus. You and I know that that intelligence of knowing how to play with invoices and make a 10, 100, or create something so that the company will be paying something to your wife or your cousin. We don't have that intelligence. Even if we had the intelligence, we don't have the disposition to do it. So let's just stick with this English that we're always speaking and hope that it pays. It was a function of, you know who you are. I'm not saying we're human beings, we'll explore, we'll go wrong, we'll try new things, but some things are fundamental. They're part of you because that's how you were raised. So that's the other element that I thought to also share with you on top of the product side, which is something around creating a culture of safety. So from the product side, I'd like to talk through something. It's called the Family Link. And if you're here, you have a device, you can go to the Play Store, take a look. Again, I'm not going to sell, I'm not saying download, but look at the reviews, read what people are saying, and then, you know, make an informed choice. But the Family Link, basically, what does it do? In creating that product, we did not just jump into creating a product for the fun of it. The creation was driven by intelligence and learning. And I'll digress here to just basically talk about one of the things, and because I'm a policy person. It's important when we do policy to be informed by realities and not just driven by fear. There's, I don't know if you are, I'm a big fan of something called the Daily Mail. You know, it's a UK, I guess it's called a tabloid, but you know, I like the balance. There's a bit of tabloid and rubbish. There's a bit of sports, football. I like football, entertainment, whatever you want. It's on the Mail, you know. And if you, and even if you don't follow the Mail, I'm sure it's on regular TV as well. You know that there's an upsurge of knife crime in the UK. You know, young kids run amok, stab somebody. It's not 200, it's not 2,000. It happens. It's almost like, okay, so when is the next one, right? Because that's how frequent it is. And I thought it interesting that in all of that, nobody has ever said, you know what? We have a knife crime problem over here. So ban the use of knives. You know, go to the stores, arrest all the knives. Anybody using a knife, we jail you. No knives. Now I can hear that someone will say, well, but they haven't solved the problem. Agreed. But I think it comes from a starting that you don't solve a problem without data and understanding what is driving the incidence of that problem. And that's one of the things that underpins the creation of the Family Link. We looked at what are the things that parents are worried about in terms of when their kids use devices and access the internet. And all of these stats go to show you the various data sets that informed the choices around the creation of the family link. And it's all sorts of things, inappropriate content, spending too much time, kids being bullied, developing poor communication skills. I mean, parents feel that, my child doesn't know how to interact and make friends. The only friend they have is their phone or something, or some mysterious friend on the internet that nobody else knows besides them, right? But I want my child to interact, Again, I keep saying, I need to stop saying when we were younger, still young, but there was that thing, right? You had a neighbor. Differences then were not as high as they are now. So you could look over what was happening in your neighbor's place, bring a bicycle, play football. If you are beating me too much, I take the ball and I go back to my house. There were things that we did that, could interact, but parents have a valid fear to do that. Look, everything that these kids need is on this device, is on the internet. So what's the incentive for them to want to go out? They can sit here all day, right? And that, of course, there's a concern around how it stunts growth and development. So that's the element of poor communication skills. Talking to strangers, we've spoken about. Tracking of online activity for marketing, again, relates to the data privacy issue. And with that, it leads us to the launch of Family Link. And what does Family Link do? Basically, it's just something that helps you as, and you don't necessarily have to be a parent. You can be someone who has that position of guardianship or whatever you choose to call it with regard to a minor. If they are going to be using products and services on the platform, what it basically allows you to do is to set up like a monitoring account. The kids already typically, in many cases, will have some kind of login or some kind of account, some kind of access to use these products and services. So what Family Link does is that you latch onto that as the parent, as the guardian, whatever it might be, and then you set the rules of engagement. That's one. In addition to setting the rules of engagement, you open up for yourself a dashboard. What the dashboard does is that I can learn from your usage behaviors and patterns, and then say more of this and less of that, or less of that and more of this, as the case may be. So in essence, what we've done with Family Link, like I said, I imagine that this would have some, okay, maybe it doesn't. What we've done with Family Link is set up those parental controls that allow parents to say, now that I have attached this account that my kid has created and through which they enjoy services online, I have this added layer through which I can monitor and keep an eye on what goes on. And there are a broad range of metrics that you can monitor, starting from things like screen time. How much time are they spending online? Do I want to set a threshold and beyond which they cannot go, and the access on any of those kind of apps or services is denied? So I mean, usage time is one of those metrics. Another metric is apps, right? So it allows you to see, and apps has two legs actually. Now, when I said apps, first thing that probably came to your mind was, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever it is that they're using. That's the app. That's one leg. It allows you to monitor what they're downloading. But you know that many times when we download these things, there's that interesting, maybe 3 seconds, where they ask you, where they try to ask you a couple of questions, and you're not really interested in answering those questions. You just want to click yes, accept all, and move on. Where was I? I can't remember, somewhere. Yeah. Sorry, I joined, I was on Twitter Spaces for the first time, and I was trying to figure out how you get this thing to work, and then you have to grant access on the mic on your device for Spaces. That's the only way you can. So my device said, go to your settings and enable Spaces. And I went to my permissions and settings, and my mind was blown at the permissions I had given, camera and mic. Things that I just said, yes. And I saw a whole list of apps and services that I probably didn't intend to, but nevertheless, they have access to my camera, they have access to my mic. In some cases, I think even my contacts, right? In some cases. So apps has those two levels. Like I said, it's one thing to be able to see what they're downloading and set restrictions. It's another equally important and maybe even more important thing to be able to see what permissions have they given. I can grant access to an app and restrict the level of permissions that I allow you to have, even though I want to use the app. So that's another critical metric that you're able to measure. I think this just gives you a bit more detail in terms of the things that we enable and empower parents to monitor using the family link. I talked about content filters, apps control, screen time, purchase controls, right? Children ordinarily, they wouldn't have credit or debit cards, right? They probably want to ride on something that you have installed either on your Play Store or whatever app store you use to facilitate payments. And many times what you need to be able to do is to see what are they authorizing, what are they paying for using my cards, and can I set blockages, right? That if anything needs to be done on his or her device using my card, I get an alert on the parent monitoring system to show me that, hey, the person is going to buy X or Y with this your card. Do you authorize or not? Again, of course, I talked about data privacy around the things about app permissions. What have your kids enabled apps to do on their devices? Again, it's just another element of the kind of things that we monitor, which I think is equally important. Location alerts, right? You have set parameters around where, like, for instance, the kids are going to school and the school is Ikeja GRA, right? So you expect that between the hours of, what are school times these days? I think it's 8 to 2 or 3 or something. You expect that within that timeline, there will be Ikeja GRA. You don't expect within that window to find that the child is in Ebute Meta, except there's an excursion. Maybe the school are singing for excursion, in which case you call the school to say, hey guys, what's going on, right? But yeah, this being able to monitor this metric is another step that gives you almost like a 360 view. Where is my child? Is this where I expect them to be at this time? If it's not, what actions do I take? It actually has that pop up like an alert to tell you that if this is the ring fence that you have created, this user or this person has stepped out of that ring fence, and then you can now take an informed decision. Okay, yes, they told me they're going to be going on excursion or this or that, so it's not an issue for you. Ring device, yeah, that's basically the same thing I would do sometimes when you're in the house and you can't find your phone. You can prompt and ring somewhere and find out where the phone is. Battery life also helps you to see how much time they have left in terms of battery charge on their phone. And again, like I said, the idea is to create information and knowledge that you can use, right? Just the same way again, and I'm going back to the zoo example. The idea is to help you, even though we have created glass enclosures, electric fencing, and all of these things, help you also make an informed choice and decision around keeping your kids safe while they're at the zoo. Same way you want to keep your kids safe while they're online. Yes, and again, I think this talks to that thing that I mentioned about how it's not just preventive and stopping, it's also active intelligence. You learn what your kids are doing, you learn how much time they spend, and based on that, you can have conversations, you can see patterns, you can see trends, right? And then have conversations with them to say, hey, I noticed X, I noticed Y, can we have a chat about this? So it's not just prescriptive and says, stop this, don't do this, don't do that. Like I said, recognize that people have different cultures, different aspirations, different objectives. So give them the tools that enable them to make an informed judgment. I think pretty much we mentioned some of these things about, timing, privacy guides, and all of that. So from that, I'll move to the other thing I talked about. Remember I said we approach this one from the product element, which is family link that I've run you through, and then also from the culture element, which is, it's not enough to say stop or don't. Create a culture, and the culture will walk them through life. So that we have this campaign, which is the Be Internet Awesome campaign. And basically what it is about educational learning. It's almost like, it's not almost like, it is a curriculum, right? We've partnered here and in other countries with third parties who help us deliver this as learning content in schools at various levels, particularly from the young and the upcoming ones. And basically what it is that we have this focus on seeing to it that it's a digital world, right? Remember, like I said, with knives, with the zoo, the objective is not to shut people out. The objective is to empower them as they go into this place. They have the intelligence, they have the information, they have the resources to make smart choices. And that's pretty much what the Be Internet Awesome campaign is about. We have a curriculum-based learning approach that we develop with some partners who are experts in the digital safety space and can basically be adopted either by educators, schools, like I said, There's a family guide element, which we'll get to later on, where even outside of the school context, as a parent, there are resources there that you can use to have a sit down and have conversations with kids. Again, I think this just highlights the tripod. And again, I'll go back to the zoo example. So remember, like the zoo, we said the zoo owners have built the zoo. They put enclosures, electric fencing, and all of that. That's one level. You as a parent, you also have your level. When you go there, keep an eye on the kids, hold hands where hands need to be held. Where people need to be spanked, they get spanked. But it's a tripod. It's not, hey, that person has done it, and I'm sure that everything is fine. You have a role to play as well. Essence of the Be Internet Awesome campaign is built around these 5 pillars. One of the things that I think is very interesting about the platform is knowing the audience, knowing those who are likely to be impacted by the content we provided there. We built some kind of gamified experience into it. So there's an interland, and I mean, you can go on your device at some point in Google and just check it out. There's a gamified element to it whereby this learning is not just text and instruction, it's games that kids can play. And in playing those games, some of these messages and some of these highlights are reinforced such that you're not taking an academic approach, if you will, to passing that culture through. You're helping them inculcate it by the habit of doing, which they will find in playing games, which typically are fun for them. So these are the 5 pillars. Like I said, it's about sharing. And a lot of these things, funny enough, it resonates with some of the things that Tope shared earlier. Who are you sharing with? Why are you sharing? What are you sharing? Don't fall for fake. Look out for things that this thing doesn't quite sound right. Why am I doing this? Secure your secrets. Again, same thing that Tope spoke about. Where your mommy is, where your daddy is, where they're coming, where they're going. Do you really need to be giving out some of that kind of information? Cool to be kind. I think this is particularly important because bullies they're not made in a special section, just like everybody else. But then I guess they get that way from experiences and things that they go through. And at no point, perhaps, was there a conversation to say, hey, this is not the way to go. There's a different way, right? So I think the thing about it's cool to be kind is helping people understand from the start that being cultured, being kind, being responsible the same way you do in physical is critically as important when you're online. Last bit is about when in doubt, talk it out. Again, it's about secrecy. Many times, even when we're younger, I remember some of these scam artists, and I laughed when I thought about it, after they've done the thing to you, and they want you to go home and go to your mommy's room and bring her money and her gold and come back and meet them somewhere. They will always say one thing, don't talk to anybody, right? Because they realize that if you spoke to somebody when you're going to be like, what's wrong with you? Where are you taking these things to, right? And you snap out of it. But the power, the hold of that thing is in the secrecy. We say don't talk to anybody. And we say, no, talk to people, right? If you find stuff that you are not comfortable about, either as a child, as a user, as a parent, as an educator, let's have a conversation. There's nothing to be hidden. There's nothing to be... If the internet was meant to be secret, you would see it in the design. The internet is open and accessible. And the thing about that is shared information, shared knowledge. Let's learn together and be better together. I think with that, I've come to the last bit of my slide. Here, just these last 2 bits, they're URLs, and I'm hoping Tope and our team are happy to share. The first bit is a pledge, which I think is an awesome piece, whereby in schools, as parents and whatever, those 5 elements, we can commit kids to say, let's take this pledge, either as a one-off or daily or weekly or whatever, as an ongoing habit, that kids raise their hand and read out those 5 lines and take that pledge, and it basically starts to stick in memory and becomes a culture. Remember, like I said, it's not enough to just give instructions. You want kids to get to a place where when they're faced with these challenges, they remember based on the things that they've learned and they make the right choices. The Be Internet Awesome Family Guide, like I said, separate from the curriculum, which is an educational or school learning piece, is something that you can adopt as a family and use in-house to create that culture. I think in closing, I'll just touch again on 2 things that I said earlier. Denial of access and shutting the gates is never an option. And I think we agree that we've packed that to one side. So it's about education and learning, creating information, providing the tools for people to make informed judgments. From the policy side, we really should not be acting out of fear. We should act based on data and understanding. What are the problems? What are we trying to solve for? And what are the best approaches to fixing that? Blanket bans are never a solution. It's just like you kick the can down the road, it will come back to you at some point, right? And I think lastly is the bit about shared responsibility. It's not enough to say that They put electric fences at the zoo so the kids can go and do what they like while I'm under the tree reading the papers. You need to keep an eye on the kids because kids will be kids and they will do things. And I think that with those approaches, it's an ongoing conversation. It's not a silver bullet. And that's why I was really pleased to speak with Tope and her team and see all the great things that they're doing. And not just doing by themselves, but doing along with some of the partners that are working with them. Everybody, I was looking at that thing interestingly. I don't know if anybody else noticed. So you have the NCC. Basically, that's government, the policymakers. You have TikTok, product, service owners. You have internet society, which I believe are like, CSOs, not-for-profits, who bring ideas, intelligence, practical stuff. And I think it's bringing all those elements together that we can use or that we should use to find solutions whereby we can continue to keep the internet safe, enjoy the benefits, the learning and the pluses, and mitigate the risks as we go on. Thank you very much.